I enjoy it. We do it, you know, and stuff. But sometimes when it's really cold.
Okay, so
Yeah, well, I'm from Texas. I've been living through the summer in Texas heat, so I'm used to hot. I can handle hot. Cold, you know. I had a good sleeping bag last night, though.
good. Just make sure. I'm going to double check everything so I don't have to. I would never ask you to come back again, of course, but cool.
Third
Okay.
time's a charm.
Yeah, I know, and it's always hard. Did you get magic the first interview?
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, yeah. Well, we'll
Yes.
just,
Oh yeah.
pretend like we did.
Exactly. Yeah, I won't even mention it. You're good with that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
all good.
Sure.
Okay. Howdy Workshop, folks. Today I've got Brad with 5 times August with me. How are you?
All right, doing great.
Great. So who is Brad?
Well, 5 times August came like right after high school. I knew music was what I wanted to do. I didn't want to promote Brad Skistimas. I thought my last name was a little bit of a mouthful, so came up with 5 times August. It's based off my birthday, August 5th, sort of a one-man band name, and it's stuck, and just been going with it ever since.
It's funny how you pick a brand early on and you get stuck with it, don't you?
Yeah.
It, anyway, it just sort of happened. So there was an artist I was listening to one day. He had picked his name back on MySpace, and it's stuck with him ever since. The artist, what's the last name of the artist? He's a rapper. Chance?
Oh, Chance.
Oh, no, anyway, it doesn't matter. But yeah, it's just funny how you get stuck with it. You know?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I mean, I made the name when I was 18, so, it was one of those periods of time where, like, there was Dashboard Confessional, he was like a one-man band kind of thing, Nine Inch Nails was a one-man band kind of thing, you sort of knew the guy behind it, and so I just sort of went with the band name, and it kind of stuck, so.
Were you a grunge fan? I never asked you that. You just mentioned Nine Inch Nails, so I didn't know.
Yeah, I mean, I listened to so much different music. I mean, at this point in my life, early on, my influences were like acoustic singer-songwriter guys. That's what really drove me to want to pursue music. But I mean, I listened to all those earlier grunge things in high school, middle school. Yeah, that was the time,
That was a good time. And they spoke out politically too, But I just had a conversation while you were gone with a guy about how the punk bands and different things used to speak out, and now they're a little bit in line with.
Yeah, that's the joke right now. Is that Rage Against the Machine is now Rage for the Machine.
Do you ever listen to Tom Morello, the guitarist? He has a. Oh yeah, I stopped. Anyway. So, okay, I first found out about you. Didn't even know necessarily who you were at first, but I found out from the Canadian video. So I was like, oh, Brad must be a Canadian, but you're not. Where are you from?
Yeah, I'm from Dallas, Texas. Yeah.
Okay. And everybody who comes to the workshop, we talk about DIY stuff. I always ask, so what was your first job in high school? What did you do?
My first job in high school was working for my parents, and I had been working with them since I was about 11 years old. And so my parents actually had an event decorating company, and they would, start out small and did just, weddings and corporate events and restaurant openings and stuff like that, would put the decor up. And then they grew it into a pretty big event company that would do parade floats and major events that were, televised things. So I was around that kind of creativity, my whole life, and just sort of watched my parents, do what they were good at together. And that sort of set the precedent for me that you just find what you're good at, and that's what you do in your life. I didn't ever think of the traditional route of, well, you go to high school, then you graduate and go to college, and then you find your major, and right out of the gate after high school, I was like, I'm a musician, and I know that's what I'm going to do, and that's where I just invested all my time. Yeah.
What did your parents say when you told them you wanted to be a musician?
Well, they've been my number one supporters, the entire time. I think it's weird for any parent when you say, I want to be a rock star.
Right.
There's some hesitancy there. But, they supported me the moment I decided I wanted to learn guitar. They got me lessons. They upgraded my guitars as I got better, and they just, went to every show, and they're still proud of me today. So, I'm very blessed and lucky to have parents like that, because they could have easily have been like, no, you're going to law school, kid. But I think, I come from a very artistic family, and they understood that kind of, that passion and pursuit. And my dad was an illustrator when I was very young, so
That's great.
he illustrated corporate ads and things
Okay.
like that. But he's the kind of guy that can stand back and he can build you something just from thinking with his mind. Doesn't need blueprints, and he's just a genius kind of creative artist. He doesn't give himself enough credit, but I learned so much from him.
And then eventually you got married, right? So
Yeah.
how'd you meet your missus?
So I met my wife working in radio.
Okay.
I was 19 and she was 21. And we were working in the promotions department at CBS Radio together.
Okay.
I was a brand new singer-songwriter, young, up-and-coming, starving kid, playing coffee shops. And actually, my boss at the radio station was the first one to sort of help me along, and he would help me sort of find better gigs, or if the radio station was having events, he would try to get me involved. And she sort of started getting involved too. So over time, as that guy sort of moved out and didn't have time to do it anymore, Kelly stepped in and sort of became the management side of Five Times August. So we became sort of a mom and pop operation long before kids, but we traveled the country together, lived out of a van, slept in parking lots. She would take care of the contracts, the tours, merchandise, collecting the checks, and I would, execute the show. So that's how we've always worked, and it is very reminiscent of my parents working together. There's sort of just two puzzle pieces that fit together to create this business.
So you did the starving artist thing together for a bit, or at least, yeah. Do you look back on the struggle with fondness? Like at the time, I know what we struggled with. It hurt and it was hard and it was a struggle. But
Yeah.
is there a bit of nostalgia for what that was at one time, or at least what it taught you?
Yeah, it's funny to look back on it because I think about all the situations we were in and the parking lots and creepy places that we spent the night, and I don't know how we survived. We never had, thankfully, we never had our van broken in. We never found ourselves face to face with any sort of super weird. We had some weird situations, but yeah, it's one of those things where it's like I would never do that again,
Right.
but I'm grateful to have experienced it because we traveled the country 10 times over, and that's how I spent my 20s. That's how we spent our 20s. It's a long honeymoon of seeing the country, traveling together, learning your best friend, and
Aw.
and we still work today. I think all that time, really helped us craft out our relationship and be ready for kids and to raise a family together.
So speaking of kids, do you have any?
I have 3 kids,
Yeah.
5, 8, and 10,
Nice.
and they're the best. They're my number one fans too. They're the sweetest kids. Some of them are. My middle son is taking up piano like a pro. He loves it. My 2 oldest started learning piano this year, but my middle son is like, he's on it. So
Okay.
I think he's got a future. But yeah, they're great.
So things change when you become a dad, don't they? Like, do you feel a little more? Is that because you kind of? Well, okay, let's slide back a little before you became a dad, or even when you were. But where did you start creating? Like, we chatted a little earlier, and you talked about some of the children's type things.
Yeah.
So where did your professional end of things? Was that what you did to pay the bills, or what was involved there?
So I've been doing music for 20 years. I started 5 Times August right after high school.
Yep.
My first big breaks were music licensing to like MTV reality shows. They found my music online, and
Anyone that stuck out?
well, there was a show called Laguna Beach on MTV,
Yep.
and that was sort of my first big break. Was they would feature like my music placements were like the music played over a montage of stuff, and then at the end it was like, you just heard music by 5 Times August. So my MySpace plays, back then it was MySpace.
Yes, MySpace.
They shot up, and that actually allowed me to sort of see where my fan base was brewing online. I had this like new tool. The internet was kind of new for indie artists to create and cultivate a fan base. So
Yeah.
my first real tour with 5 Times August was a pretty successful little coffee shop tour where I went up to Maryland and Chicago, and I found the places where that fan base was brewing. And then that parlayed into college touring, and I was touring colleges and universities after that. And by the time I became a dad, I was kind of burnt out on traveling, Kelly
Okay.
and I. And we took some time off from the road, started raising a family, and then ultimately that I decided my whole world was my kids, and I started a kids music project called the Juice Box Jukebox.
I love that name.
Thanks. It's a little bit of a
It
even
is.
I have trouble saying it
But
sometimes.
I love it. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
cool.
So I was doing kids music. I started that in 2018,
Okay.
and I was making music with my kids. I would have them be involved in the songs, and I'd make the videos. I partnered with some local schools in my area to make the music videos and have more kids involved. And it was very, just a homegrown little project, but that music found its way into homeschooling and homeschool parents and even public schools have been finding these songs and adding them to their programs, and it's been really cool. So that's what I was doing pre-pandemic era stuff.
Why do we always quote it?
Pandemic
Yeah. When
stuff.
the world happened. Yeah.
Yes. And I was getting ready to tour elementary schools actually, and then I had to cancel all that. And then I was sort of stuck hanging around the house. I was doing,
Like everyone.
yeah.
Yep.
So we all sort of went along with the 2 week thing, and I was doing parodies at home out of my kitchen, and they started going viral. So I was doing these little parodies. I did about 12 of them, and it was just my way of just, people were home, they were getting depressed. It's my way of giving a little bit of
Make them smile.
levity of the situation. Yeah. So I did that. I got kind of bored with it after 12 because it was like, how long are we going to do this? And it kind of shut me down after a while. So I didn't release anything for about 8 or 9 months, and circled my way back around to sort of deciding to speak out through my music, and
Right.
that's where I sort of landed now. So I went from kids music
Yep.
into political protest music. So.
So you went from like lamb chops play along to Alice's restaurant.
Right, yeah.
That's incredible. So, okay, that must have been a bit alienating, was it? Like, because I would assume your fan base had an idea of who Five Times August was. You played good music and kind of feel good music, or
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden you became the guy, that was
Yeah.
doing the really cool. You were doing what the bands were doing in the '60s, right? So I mean, I obviously, So how did that come about? I mean, were you just getting more and more frustrated, or?
Yeah, it's sort of at the end of 2020, I was just thinking about the world that we were creating and what I was going to leave behind for my kids, and I didn't want to look back on this time going like, oh, I didn't do anything. I didn't want my kids to grow up into some crappy world and go, Dad,
Yeah.
what did you do during that time when, everybody was putting chains on? So, I had 20 years of music, of a fan base across the whole spectrum of things. People, that whole college crowd that followed me, they grew up, had families. Some of them, found my kids' stuff again, and they reignited their fanship because now they had music for their kids. But then, I decided to start speaking up with my music, and the first one I put out was a song called God Help Us All. And it was sort of just a prayer for our times of just, that's where we're at.
Yep.
What else do we have to ask for other than God's help at this point? We've done so much damage. And instantaneously, I mean, I had fans dropping off, sending me mean messages. Oh, I'm not listening to your music anymore. I'm going to delete it. But as one would go away, a few more would trickle in, and new people were discovering my music, saying thank you for speaking up because nobody else was. And you mentioned the 60s artists and stuff. Those were the people that I grew up with. And, I was looking around at that time wondering where those people were because not very many artists were starting to speak out. We were actually experiencing tyranny in our country, an overreaching government. And I'm like looking around, where's all the rebels,
Anyone in particular stand out to you that you respected and maybe thought they should have went?
Sure. Well, I mean, Bob Dylan is that quintessential folk artist who, protest artist of that period, and I was looking around, going, if where's Bob Dylan? If Bob Dylan's not going to be around, I'll try to slide in. So I just sort of started doing music with my guitar,
Yeah.
something raw, that's real, that you can sort of feel that emotion, because music right now is so polished and pristine, and it's kind of empty as far as what it's saying. And I felt like people, we've lost connection with that.
Yeah.
And then over the year, you've seen artists like Neil Young, take his stand, but
Oh,
really
he took
he's
a
just,
stand.
yeah, he took a stand. He's drawing a line in the sand, saying, if with the whole Spotify thing, um, saying, you can either have me or you can have Joe Rogan. And these artists that are doing that, Pink was another one that was like, after Roe v. Wade, after that decision was overturned, she was like, well, if you believe in that, then you can't listen to my music, or I don't want you to listen to my music. I spoke up through my music, but I would never say, if you don't agree with me, then don't listen to my music. That's the opposite of what music is supposed to be. It's supposed to bring us together. And if you don't believe in what the artist is saying, at least they're having you think about it. But the artist's job is never to turn people away. That's been the saddest thing. You've seen segregated concerts over the last year of, only if you're vaccinated, only if you've tested negative, you must show a proof. And it alienates people. And so, for me, watching, my peers and these legends that are supposed to, my industry peers that are supposed to be speaking up against the system, they've joined the system. And it's an ironic thing. It's flipped itself around. I think I mentioned this earlier, but I realize the most rock and roll thing that you can do is be a conservative at this point.
It's unreal, isn't it?
Yeah.
I, I don't understand because. So, was it scary for you, or maybe not scary? I mean, once we get to a certain age, but at least intimidating, because you put yourself out there. Any creator who takes a stand that's against the status quo. Mm-hmm. So did you get? I mean, other than fans, did you get any feedback or kickback from social media or from the media in general, anything like that, or?
Oh yeah, I mean, I had friends across the board in the industry, from all different, backgrounds and beliefs, and I was good friends with them. Then once I started speaking out what was important to me, a good chunk of them fizzled out, didn't want to work together anymore. And then, a lot of the music videos have been suppressed on YouTube, and I'm right now in the middle of a 30-day suspension on Facebook. Yep. And, shadow banning, stuff like that. But Wikipedia deleted the 5 times August page. It had been up for about 15 years, and all of a sudden they had a problem with it after I released Sad Little Man, which was about Fauci. So, it's interesting that, on the outskirts of things, before I jumped in, I knew that there would be some pushback, and I had heard about the censorship. We all saw it with Trump and everything, and so to experience it firsthand has been a whole other thing, because by the time Wikipedia is deleting your page, you're like, really? Like, is the 5 times August page really that prime real estate on Wikipedia that you've got to delete it to make a statement? Or
I don't under. It reminds me of the Ministry of Truth from 1984. Just the whole, what's the truth now is the only truth there ever was.
Mm-hmm.
So you got into, so in the traditional vein of 1960s and 70s, post-government or anti-government, you've been going to some live events and some protests. What you went to a pretty big one.
Yeah, in January there was a rally in D.C. called Defeat the Mandates. And there was about 30,000 people in attendance. It was right on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial.
Okay.
And it was a beautiful day. It was a beautiful event. It was, you could see the unity all around you. People from all different backgrounds coming together, sharing their stories, speaking up with one central purpose, which was, to say no to these mandates that were, trying to eke their way into our ways of life. But I got to perform on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, which was a pretty huge deal. It's one of the coolest things I've ever done.
that puts a bit of a target on your back, doesn't it? I mean, and so, I mean, I guess we all have to draw our line and decide this is where I'm going to speak out. But there's been other famous protests from the Lincoln Memorial in the past, right? Was
Yeah.
Martin Luther King's was there?
Yeah, the point of that day was kind of to sort of reflect upon Martin Luther King's famous rally at the Lincoln Memorial. We started at the Washington Monument and we all walked down together to the Lincoln Memorial.
Sure.
And Bob Dylan had played that day at the Martin Luther King rally, and so I had to sort of think about how I was going to make that moment special, being on those steps. And I was supposed to play Sad Little Man.
Okay. Which is a great song, by the way.
Thank you very much. I mean, I enjoy it. It's probably the most popular song that has come out of this grouping of songs. But I also knew that media was going to be there, and they were going to be judging any little thing that they could to spin it as extremists. And I didn't want them to take extremist songwriter performs at right-wing rally and calls for Anthony Fauci's execution or something. Because they would, and that's not the intent of the song, but of course. And so I wrote the organizers like hours before the event was supposed to take place and asked if I could sing a different song. So I ended up performing a song called Silent War, and the tone of it was just a beautiful moment. Was really proud to have stood there, and people were coming up to me later saying that the song was echoing throughout the park, and it brought some of them to tears, and that stuff means the world to me. The connection that these songs have made, not just here in the United States, but up through Canada and around the world, the feedback that I've gotten is just means everything to me, because I started speaking out feeling alone, and then what happened real quick was I'm speaking out so other people don't feel alone either. And there's more of us out there than there are, than the media wants you to believe.
Well, look at the trucker convoy. So how did that? So I had heard your stuff in the background. Everybody's like, "Hey, check out this Fauci song," and I'm like, "This is crazy. I love it." But I didn't dig any further. And then the convoy song came along, and I was like, "Oh, that's when I thought you were Canadian." Turns out you weren't, which is you're an honorary Canadian.
Thank you.
I'll send you some poutine and some maple syrup. So,
all right.
So how did that song come about?
Well, I was just watching the protests and the trucker protests. I just thought that was the coolest way of speaking up. I thought it was great. And you have this guy, Trudeau, his people came to his doorstep to speak to him, and he ran away. And that speaks volumes about not just him as a leader, but all of our leaders are running away from their people. And I'm watching this. People are there real time with their phones, posting it as it happens. You're seeing the bounce houses. You're seeing unity circles of people singing "We Are the World Together," things like that. And it's awesome. That's how you peacefully protest. After several years of seeing buildings burning down, that's the way to do it. Honk real loud, show up, cook for one another, create a community, and say, look, we want to fix this. But he ran away. I just wanted to show my support, and I thought it was great. So I wrote a song called "This Just In," which was a play on words towards Justin, and also a play on words on the media too. Just calling him out, mocking him. And I think, that's just one of the great things that we can do, anybody can do, is that we all have a voice online, whether you're a songwriter or anybody else, is, fighting back and mocking these people that think they're, up here on some other tier where they're looking down, they're making the rules up for everybody, that are they're so disconnected that they really have no clue, or they're intentionally just evil. So
And either way, it's just as bad.
Either way is bad, and I figure I have this platform, I might as well use it. So I think that's something that we all should do, is find out, what do I have to offer this scenario, and use my skills and abilities to do that. You've got a podcast, and that lends a voice to the movement, and I have music, and that's just what we should all be doing.
That's cool. And it was a rallying cry. I don't know how many times in back channel Telegram or Signal groups somebody sent me this video and they're like, "Look at this! It's about the trucker convoy." I'm like, "Yeah." So, do you have just a couple more minutes?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Talk about your creative process. I love your animation style. To me, it reminded me of like Monty Python's Flying Circus and that kind of stuff. So, where did that idea? Where did that come from? Your inspiration, and how did you start designing it?
So I mentioned the kids' music with
Yes.
the Juice Box Jukebox, and I was doing music videos for each one of those songs, and I taught myself sort of animation, how to do it. I wanted it to look good, but I also had a limited ability, so I sort of created this cut and paste stop motion style, and by the time I started doing these songs and took that skill set and applied it in a more adult way, it kind of gave it that look, that Monty Python's look that you're speaking of. And I think subconsciously, it was sort of in the back of my mind, like, that'd be a unique approach to it. And it sort of gave it its own little style, and it helps enhance what I'm saying with the music. I like the fact that I can add a visual to my music because it helps accentuate what I'm trying to say with the music.
And it builds, it adds the humor and the satire as well. It looks foolish in a good sense. It kind of exacerbates that foolishness,
Right.
And
Yeah.
so, do you have any new music coming out anytime soon?
Yeah, so I'm taking all these songs right now, and I'm going to put them into an album.
Okay.
There's 10. I've released 10 of them over the last year. I've got 2 more that are ready to go. That'll be on the album, and that will be out in November, and it'll be out on CD and vinyl.
Yes.
And
cassette.
cassette. If enough people buy it,
Yes,
I'll put it on cassette. That would be great.
I'm
That would be
vinyl
really
head,
cool.
though, so I'm friggin' excited about that. That's cool. So.
Yeah, so I'll have pre-order links up on my website soon, and that'll be great. I mean, I really appreciate that people even want the physical copy of it. That's great, and I think that's something that we're sort of missing too, is the idea of holding the things that, mean something to us. Art in particular. We're also digital now with Spotify and Amazon, and a lot of those services are really just a way to rent music, and you don't really own it. But when you can hold it, read the lyrics along with it, and it's yours, the internet can't take it away from you. It's the same thing with books, they can edit information and remove it at any point. It's great to have that physical copy of things, so I'm looking forward to putting them all together. It'll be a nice little time capsule, I think.
It'll be your pandemic sessions.
That's
your
right.
lockdown sessions.
That's right.
So what's the best way if somebody hears you and they're like, I want to give him money. I mean, I want to support him.
Sure.
What's the best way to support you, and how do we find you?
You can go to 5timesaugust.com.
Okay.
It's all spelled out, FIVE times August, and not the number 5.
Yes.
And I've got a donations link on there if you just kind of want to support the music, like a digital tip jar. I've got shirts on there, links to find the digital music right now, and pretty soon they'll have the pre-order links for the physical copies. And I've got a mailing list on there.
Perfect.
So make sure you sign up on the mailing list at 5timesaugust.com in case I get booted from all of the social media platforms. So I'm also on Facebook and Instagram, Twitter, Getter, Gab, BitChute, Rumble, Truth, all of them. I'm on all of them. Predominantly on Twitter and Facebook because I like to cause trouble, but you can find me at 5timesaugust on all those platforms too.
Do you ever stir up any shit on Twitter?
Of course I do.
Yeah.
That's my job on Twitter.
Get banned on there yet or no?
I have been suspended.
Okay.
I've had to delete a few posts that have caused trouble, but that's sort of my angle right now is I'll just be as loud as I want to be and exercise my freedom of speech until they kick me out.
Poke the bear.
That's right.
Perfect. Well, thanks, Brad.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate it, man. Thank you.
Appreciate it.